These two markers represent tragedy, one to a family, the other to a native nation. Both are reminders of a time no longer, like the mist that surrounds them. The story these plaques portray are vague. This film explores the spirit of an age that allowed these events to happen. Reforms created by a dominant society ignited a genocidal reaction that caused a complete cultural revolution.
I think the Spanish mission and Mexican era mission period is important to remember that 80,000 Indians died laboring at the missions of California, unpaid. There's no way you can explain that. There's no other word for unpaid labor than slavery.
Even though the Lake County Pomos were 16 miles from Mission de Solano in Sonoma, they seem to have avoided the great epidemics and enslavements that afflicted over 90% of the coastal tribes.
If you looked around you and looked at all of your friends and your family and put them in one room and then said, in a year, I will be the only one here, then you suddenly get a sense of what it was like in terms of people's ongoing ways of life.
The reforms of the Spanish missions affected the lives of the Indians primarily by introducing into their worlds a host of different ways of living. Generally, the reforms were such as to give the Indian cultures a severe shock.
General Vallejo, with his brother Salvador, took possession of the Solano mission in 1836, which had enslaved hundreds of Indians. In 1843, a deadly epidemic annihilated their native workers, so they captured 300 Clearlake Pomos to replenish their workforce. 4 years later, in 1847, as American expansion was sweeping westward, Andrew Kelsey and Charles Stone were deeded Salvador Vallejo's Big Valley Ranch and slave holdings.
Well, Manifest Destiny makes assumptions of racial, cultural superiority. It says basically that a more powerful race, a culturally superior race, in their belief, was destined to take over the land.
Manifest Destiny, it's such a beautiful concept, and the way that Americans saw it in the 1800s was as a beautiful white lady. And she was like a goddess, and she was sweeping over the land. And it was this idea that the American nation was unstoppable.
Treacherous conditions endured by the Pomos on the Kelsey Stone Ranch contradicted this goddess-like image of Manifest Destiny. Kelsey and Stone starved, whipped, hung, and even killed the Pomos and routinely molested their girls.
The revolutionary consequence, I think, is this redefinition of the Indian as either laborer or savage. One of the most revolutionary effects is to sort of drop them down the social scale almost as far as they could be dropped.
So the Indians finally got tired of it. You know, they were hungry, and they were being treated awful, you know, disrespectful, so they went and had a meeting, and they decided, well, we better get rid of these guys.
In December of 1849, Andrew Kelsey and Charles Stone were murdered by a small uprising of local Indians. This brutal execution coincided with the onslaught of the California Gold Rush.
The Gold Rush was probably the darkest period for California Indians in the respect that all law and order broke down. We're talking about 100,000 Indians dying in 2 years. That's the greatest body count in United States Indian history. Nowhere else did more Indians die in a shorter period of time.
When your attitude of arrogance and racial superiority is accompanied by guns, and bigger guns and better guns and more guns, then the people you are then going to inflict all that on are going to lose.
Lieutenant Davidson was dispatched from the Benicia barracks. When he arrived, the Pomo Indians took refuge on the islands of Clearlake. He returned to Benicia reporting that all the Indians were in one way or another responsible for the deaths of Kelsey and Stone.
The first introduction from America to my great-grandmother of freedom, justice, and liberty, and the pursuit of happiness was this cannonball.
The Battle of Bloody Island began by Lieutenant Davidson bombarding the island with his mountain howitzer from the shore to distract the Indians, while Captain Lyons came in with 3 whaling boats with 45 soldiers to attack from the rear. In less than 30 minutes, the battle spiraled into a killing frenzy that could only be described as a massacre.
They fired this cannon off, and it hit the island, and all the Indians, they seen this ball come over there and hit the island, and it just stuck in the ground and didn't do nothing, you know, and they seen that, and so they all went over there to go look at this ball, and they surrounded this ball, this cannonball, and then they fired another ball, and you can imagine what happened when that ball hit with those people surrounding that ball.
The Indians quickly retreated to the other side of the island, only to be met by a barrage of bullets. By the time Captain Lyon landed, most of the Pomo men had been killed, leaving women, children, and elders to fight or flee. Most fled to the tule weeds that surrounded the island to hide, submerging themselves underwater and breathing through hollowed-out tule reeds.
Nathaniel Lyon told his men to put their cartridges around their necks, fix bayonets, and go into the tules after the Pomo women and children who were trying to escape.
There's stories about this one lady. She was laying on the ground, and she seen 2 soldiers come up with a little girl on their bayonet, and they threw this little girl in the lake. Then she goes, a few minutes later, she seen a little boy hanging on the bayonets, and they threw him in the lake.
This is considered to be one of the most brutal massacres in American history. Not one soldier was injured. I've heard accounts of between 100 to 500 Native Americans were killed. It was brutal, and it was butchery, and it was unnecessary, but Nathaniel Lyon at that point had taken his orders to the furthest extreme.
Can you imagine a 6-year-old girl under about 3-4 feet of water, and for about a half hour while all this killing was going on, and then coming out of the water and just looking around, all around her, you know, in the tules, and looking through the water, and everything was just red with blood. And all her cousins and her aunts and uncles and grandparents and everybody was just laying there dead. Can you imagine what went through that little 6-year-old girl's head? Now, today, 2001, this island is called Bloody Island now. It's no longer Bonaparte, Bloody Island. And the monument says a battle. There was no battle. You know, it was just mass murder.
Raw military aggression fed by a jingoistic, nationalistic fervor which has religious sort of connotations to it, that somehow we are superior people and we deserve to have what these people own.
There was a revolution, clearly. And it seems to me that perhaps it was complete in that it set the California Indians on a new course. They were marginalized, pushed out from the center of their world to the edges of somebody else's world.
The reforms of the Spanish missions Manifest Destiny and the Gold Rush were like rolls of thunder during a storm, a migrational storm that completely washed from the land an ancient way of living. The massacre at Bloody Island was a crucial event in history because it was the first U.S. Army endorsed reaction against the California Native population, setting a precedent for future massacres. This cultural revolution was created by the ensuing public acceptance of these genocidal methods, which inspired 20 years of similar events throughout California. Like wolves in a feeding frenzy, it was a time of thunder and wolves.